Hey there, Banditos. Welcome to the last episode for this week of the Dollar Bin Bandits. I'm Mike Farah, and today we have Mr. Joe Jusko, Mr. Joe Pruett, and they are on for the occasion of the Kickstarter Book of Jusko. It's an art book. It's actually kind of a sequel to a previous art book they had put together. And it is, like that first one, a career retrospective on the work of Joe Jusko. And you know Joe as a painter. He's done so many different covers, both in comics and in print books. He has done trading cards. You probably know him or first got to know him maybe for the 1992 Marvel Masterpieces trading card set, which were just phenomenal. And he goes into a little bit about his process, a little bit about the genre that he likes to illustrate. And the man, Joe Pruett, who is a publisher and a comic writer himself, brings this all to life in a awesome new Kickstarter. So go check that out, back it, and let's get to the conversation. This is Joe Jusko and Joe Pruett. Mr. Joe Jusko and Mr. Joe Pruett join the program. Joes, how are you?
I'm doing fine, thanks.
Great. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. So the occasion of this recording is the Book of Jusko, which is on Kickstarter right now.
Which sounds so pretentious.
It's the lost book of the good book, right?
Yes. Indiana Jones should be looking for this thing.
Exactly.
You should have seen the other titles I came up with.
Oh, they were great.
I hope it comes with a leather, like dusty cover that you have to blow off.
Exactly.
But since it's the first time for both of you on the program, I am obligated to ask you our standard first question. You can take it in either order, whichever Joe wants to go first. And that is, how did you first discover comic books?
I guess I'll go. My older brother and my father used to read them. So they were always in the house when I was growing up. So there never weren't comic books around.
I think for me, I just happened to be going to the local corner market or department store or Eckerd Drugs, and they would always have a spinner rack, and that's where I discovered them.
And you both were just smitten from the beginning and
From the start,
continued to get
Yeah,
into
I
collecting?
was. Yeah, I mean, I read them. I remember they didn't buy it like they weren't collectors of any specific titles or anything. So I remember there were Dr. Solars in the house. My brother liked Dr. Solar. There a lot of Gold Key stuff. Occasionally there'd be a Marvel or a Batman in the house. So there was nothing. It wasn't exactly it was an organized collection. It was very eclectic. So I would just read whatever was there. Until I was old enough to start, realizing the stuff that I particularly liked myself.
And I was a little opposite. I was more of a Marvel zombie from day one, with a few DCs here, a few Gold Key or something here and there, but it was Marvel or nothing.
Yeah, well, once my friends and I started when I was like 8, 9 years old, and we started to buy our own comics. I gravitated toward Marvel. I was a Marvel kid. I mean, I bought everything that came out because my father's idea of babysitting me was he would sit at the bar with his friends and send me to the corner store on a corner with a couple of bucks to buy as many comics as I could. And I sat in the booth, and read comic books and drank Coke. So it's like that's really how I really got really into comics. Was just that was they were my babysitter really for the most part.
I didn't buy everything, but I did have a twin brother and a younger brother. So while I didn't buy it, they would buy. So I read everything.
Yeah.
You could do worse for a babysitter other than comics and a can of Coke.
Oh yeah, no, yeah, absolutely. And like I said, it's like I would go back, and after I finished stuff that I did have, I'd go and buy. So I bought Casper's Ghostland. I mean, by the time I was done with the Marvel and the DC stuff, I was left with Gold Key and Casper's Ghostland. The only thing I didn't buy was Archie. I bought all the Harvey stuff that came out and everything. So I read just about everything when I was a kid.
Excellent. Well, let's see how that all kind of feeds into this new project. I'm going to read kind of a quote description here. The Book of Jusko, a career-spanning deluxe hardcover tribute to Joe Jusko's epic legacy in fantasy comics and pop culture illustration.
Wow.
Whose idea was this? And how did it all come about? And why was this the right time to do it?
Well, we had done a book back in 2008 called the Art of Joe Jusko that really covered the first 30 years of my career. And it's been how long has it been now? 14, 15 years
17 years.
since
Yeah.
that book. Yeah, maybe 17 years since that book. And there's been a lot of other stuff since then, and we just felt that I think a second volume was maybe warranted because of all the other stuff that people hadn't seen.
It was definitely time. The first one, did a couple of printings, sold out. And like Joe says, it did cover the first, 30 years of its career. But this one's onward from 2008, but also it dips back into the earlier
Right.
years too. So
Yeah.
nothing in this book was in the first book.
Right.
So if there's anything before 2008 that's in this book, it was not in the previous volume.
Right.
And you published the first one as well, Joe Pruett, is that correct?
Yeah. So did it when I was had a company called Desperado Publishing. I published that. Actually, the first printing was solo when I was just Desperado. I was with Image Comics for the Brian Ballin one. They went solo for Joe and the Tim Bradstreet one. Then hooked up with Tim IDW for the remaining 7. So the second printing of your book, Joe, was through IDW's.
Right. Right.
The first one was just me solo, and this one's me solo again.
So it sounds like you guys have known each other for quite a long time. Can I ask how you first met?
I honestly don't remember. It had to be at a convention.
I
Probably
think
probably at a convention bar, I would think.
it was probably in Pittsburgh, I think. I remember being at the convention bar in Pittsburgh, and you were there in Charles Vass, and we were playing darts in the bar.
Right.
And that you end up being a ringer.
Yeah,
So
I played competitive darts for years in New York City, and my team won the city championship a bunch of times. So yeah, I've played before.
yeah, we didn't know that at the time. So Joe was
Well, you're not supposed to know that.
Drink in and like this, and we're like, what the hell? So I do know that Charles Vest was so intimidated that he actually went out and bought a dartboard and practiced on his own.
Did he really?
So next time I saw him, he goes, I've been practicing.
Oh, that's pretty funny. I didn't know that. That's great.
You guys got to recreate that and see who's the master now.
There's still a dartboard up in the studio. It's you can't see it from where I can see it. You guys can't see it, but there's still a dartboard. All the trophies and the plaques are put up around it, so whoever I play is intimidated by the fact that I used to play.
It's funny. I had I had an office in a movie studio for like 10 years recently, and 2 of my studio mates were Paul Jenkins and Brian Stelfreeze. And Paul would bring in a dartboard, like a really nice high-end dartboard. He would put it out in the common area, and we'll play. And then he brought 2, but both of them were stolen. Because this is the studio, and this out anybody could grab it if they wanted it. People were just steal it. They stole my refrigerator at one time.
That's hysterical.
Because all these movie studios would come in and just take stuff. I came in one night, my refrigerator was gone. I'm like, where's my refrigerator?
Right. That's great. Yeah, I remember I was with Jimmy Palmiotti in Brooklyn one time, and we were bouncing around during the day, and we stopped into a bar for a couple of drinks, and there were 2 guys playing darts, and I was watching them play, and Jimmy just looked at me, he went, ka-ching. I was like, no, I'm gonna be good. I'm gonna be good today.
Like Tom Cruise over here in Color of Money or something. The hustle.
Yeah. It sounded to me like a setup for a joke, like three comic guys walk into a bar.
Yeah, basically.
All right, so Joe Jusko, you've done this, I guess, once before, but what is it like to kind of go back in some time, decades, back through your career and kind of curate this work and put together a retrospective like this?
Yeah, it's funny. It's like I have mixed feelings about the early stuff. Like, I know everything that's wrong with it, and I could see that today. I mean, I started when I was 18. My first magazine cover was the Heavy Metal when I was 18, and then I went to Marvel and sold my first cover to Marvel when I was 18. So I didn't really know what I was doing back then. So they're not great paintings. I had asked Jim Shooter a few years ago. We were at a convention, and I said, the stuff I was doing back then wasn't really very good. How did you guys keep giving me work? And he said, well, yeah, you were kind of raw, but you knew what we wanted on a cover. And that, I think, was what was really important, is that I knew what made a good cover from Marvel. And so they let me learn while I was working. So I mean, in the ensuing years, I mean, I look back on that stuff now, and I can see what a learning process that was. So I really I like looking at the early stuff, you know, because I could see I could see where I was going, what I was trying to do, and how it got me to where I am today. You know, I still don't like hanging my own art in my house. You know, to this day, my wife finally has like a one wall where we have a couple of pieces up that she likes. But I'd rather hang art that inspires me than look at my own mistakes all the time. You know, because that's I still look at it the same way. But yeah, I really like looking going back on the early stuff because it's really, especially this further in the you know, far in the future from where I started, I can see the journey, you know, and it's I find it kind of interesting.
Yeah, that was actually a follow-up I had was can you really kind of see the evolution from the early days through, you know, now having that experience under your belt and how you approach projects?
Yeah, I think my style hasn't much changed. My approach, my style hasn't changed. My technique and my mastery of the materials definitely has. You know, I'm much more confident now in the way I apply my paint, and the fact that I think I know how to do what I'm doing because I have that many years experience behind me. You know, learning the tools, and when I was younger, I would try to put something in each painting that I had never done before, which would help me learn how to paint something else. So yeah, I can definitely see the progress from the early pieces to now, especially in the drawing and the rendering, and just and the final finesse of the paintings.
And Joe Pruett, what made you want to spearhead this project, and how, if any, in any way, did you want to make it different than the first art book, or what did you maybe learn from the first one?
Well, I've done a lot of things in the industry. Been a writer, I broke in thinking I was going to be an artist, quickly realized I was not going to be. I've lettered, I've edited, I've been a creative director, I've been a publisher, I've owned a couple of my own companies. Uh, but anyway, whenever I change gears in a company, like when I started Desperate Publishing back in the early mid 2000s, is after my run working at Marvel and X-Men comics, right, as a writer. And after that went away, I said, what do I want to do to energize myself? What I wanted is I want to work with my friends. And that's when I started that company. I had to work with my friends doing personal projects. And when I was doing that, that's when the idea of start doing art books came to me. So the first one I went out and got was Brian Ballin, who was a good friend of mine, who I knew I could sell a book on. And then so I did his when the ice the first time I tried one. Greg Russell, P. Greg Russell, the next one I did, got nominated for the ice for the second time. Said, this is easy, right? So Joe was either the third or the fourth one. I can't remember if you or Bradstreet were third. One of you two were 3 and 4. I have to look at it.
Yeah, I can't remember.
And so I did 10 of them over the years. The 4 I just mentioned, and Starlin and Jeffrey Jones and Manny Connor and some others. And then I think I kind of burned out of it for a while. And then about that time, I was slowing down to the art books. That's when Aftershock Comics came around that I helped to form. So I went into that direction. So I think, every 10 years I need a change of pace. Either I'm going to be a writer for 10 years, I'm going to be a publisher for 10 years. I'll be working the art books, which I probably did for about 8, maybe 10 years on those. So now that I left publishing behind as a publisher, my thought again is what do I want to do now again. So now I like writing. That's my number one passion. So I started writing. I've got a lot of stuff coming up through Image and some of the companies in the months to come. But the other thing I really enjoyed was the art books because I got to work with great, good friends and great, artists like Joe here, and it was a fun collaboration the first time. It was very successful. Um, I've noticed on crowdfunding platforms nowadays that a lot of people are doing art books now, and similar to what I used to do with the type of creators I would do, and they did very successful with it. And so I said, well, I should be doing those again. And so Joe is the first one that I had the idea of. And when I ran into Joe last year, I guess at Heroes Con in Charlotte, I came to
Right.
the idea I wanted to do this art book again with him, a new one, because it's been 17 years. And unlike a lot of artists, Joe has kept working steadily in those years. So I knew this would be enough volume for another book of the size we usually do, 200, 300 page books.
Yeah.
And Joe says, "Hey, I've been wanting to I thought about getting in touch with you because I wouldn't mind doing a new art book." And so it was just kismet, and we just said, "Okay, let's start doing it." And so here we are.
Yeah. Right. Here we are.
Well, a question for both of you is because I'm sure Joe Jusko, you've also, consumed your fair share of art books as well.
Sure.
What makes for a good art book, and maybe even as opposed to what most people think of as like a graphic novel, they're totally different. But
Right.
for the art book format, what makes a good art book?
Well, yeah, you're right. I'm an art book fanatic. I mean, my library, any book that comes out that's a collection of somebody's work. If I like their work, I buy stuff from overseas. I have like tons of domestic art books. I'm an art book maniac. And the thing I like most about art books, the ones that I really truly appreciate, are the ones that have personal input from the artists themselves. It's not just a book of
Yeah.
posters and pinups and postcards and stuff like that. It has the actual words and thoughts of the people who made the art. So like we did with the first book, I've written copy for just about every single piece in the book. Just some kind of anecdote or story behind the paintings, or the company, because I remember working on just about every single piece. So I find that having the insight from the actual artist instead of a third person talking about the art, I find to be a more of a learning experience than looking at the paintings themselves, because you're inside the mindset of the person who painted them, and you get there's sort of an historical relevance to the paintings based on the time they were painted and how they were painted and why they were painted and stuff like that. So that's what makes a good art book for me. That, and I learned to paint basically by buying any art book that had a technique section in it somewhere. If the guy showed his process and showed how he worked, I would buy that art book and I would try to cobble something from how he worked and see if I can somehow incorporate that into how I was working, to try and build my skills, because I'm a completely self-taught painter. So I learned to paint by really studying how everybody did everything else and trying to somehow fold it into how I worked. And then eventually your own techniques take over and your own style takes over. But yeah, I think the personal input from the artist himself is what makes a really good art book.
Joe, I would second that because that's one thing I would say will make my books different than most of the books. And the thing is because it's always in the artist's voice. So when we start off doing the art books, I always wanted that personalized input that makes it different. It's not a pinup book.
Right.
We don't need to do a pinup book. This is Joe's life. This is his career. So nobody can talk about better than he can. So I always try to make sure that voice is in the books. So I think this is my 11th art book. So only one didn't have the artist's voice, and that was the Jeffrey Catherine Jones one. And Jeffrey Catherine was not in a position to do the voice person.
Yeah.
So
So Joe Pruett, you have 40 plus years of an amazing career to
all right,
try
well,
to.
not
talking
yet.
about
Not yet.
I'm talking about Joe Jusko's.
Okay. This is your number 36 for me.
Okay. Joe Jusko, I'm assuming that I have those numbers correct.
I'm coming up on almost seven in 2027. It'll be 50 years for me, which is
Right.
hard to believe. And it's funny, the fact that I started when I was so young. When people meet me for the first time, they expect me to be 90 years old, because no one expects me, to have started when I was 17. So it's like there was a guy in Heroes last year, and there was a line of people, and I heard them talking, and they're like, "That's him right there. Where is he? I don't see him." And no, that's him. That can't be him. So the guy gets up to the table, he looks at me, he goes, "I got to tell you, man, you look freaking great." I was like, "How old do you think I am?" So you look incredible, man. I was like, "Well, thanks, but I'm not quite as old as you think I am."
So decades of a career, but not as old as we think you are, which is good. And you have to kind of put that career onto paper.
Right.
What is it like organizing, that much material, that much output into, a book that, has to be finite in some way.
Right.
Trying to figure out like what pieces to go in, where to concentrate your sort of energies on what kind of pieces. What was it like organizing?
Well, I mean, I do know the stuff that I worked on that people really like. You know, there are fan favorite characters. You know, the Vampirella, Conan, the Edgar Rice Burroughs stuff. You know, I've done an absolute ton of superhero stuff over the years. That you know, I mean, those Marvel Masterpiece cards in '92 pretty much made my career, and I've carried that with me through today. I still sign more of those cards than anything else I've ever done. But I go through it. I try to pick out. I mean, you can't put every Conan painting in or every Tarzan painting. So you pick out the ones that you really like that you think showcase something that worked better than some of the others. I remember the stuff that people like. The ones I get signed, asked to sign more than others. At conventions, you tend to gravitate toward that kind of stuff, the more popular stuff. But I also like to put in stuff that people haven't seen. You know, I've done a lot of private commissions that haven't been seen publicly except maybe on my Facebook page, and how many people see that? You know, it's so that there's a lot of stuff that people haven't seen, a lot of jobs outside of comics that I've done that people hadn't seen, that didn't realize that I did. So it's basically just trying to put a nice balance together of stuff that either is really popular or would be new to people who haven't seen stuff before, so they don't feel like they're buying the same thing over and over again.
I got to read a little bit of the advance, I guess, galley of this book, and I thought it was intriguing that it's kind of organized into themes,
Hmm.
themes of your work. And so I guess my question is for Joe Pruett, if that was your idea, or if that's, have you done that kind of thing before? Is this kind of a
Yeah.
better way of organizing a longer career?
Well, yeah, I think it is. I prefer the themes, because as Joe just mentioned, we can't put every Conan piece in. We can't put every Tarzan piece in. However, we can only put so much of each, by law.
And going chronologically, you know, if you go chronologically from when I was 17 years old, you're going to start with a bunch of really rough and crappy work in the beginning of it, you know, and it's going to slowly gravitate. So I didn't want to, I remember with the first
Yeah.
book, I didn't want to go chronologically for that reason, that
Yeah.
it would start off really weak before you got to like the stuff where I kind of knew what I was doing. So by breaking it into themes, you've got early stuff, later stuff, you know, and there's a nice melange of work.
Yeah, I think when I did the Brian Bolland one, I did do it
Yeah,
chronologically.
you did.
But I think for the same reason that you just mentioned, I rethought that process later on. I said, well, you're putting, no offense to Brian at the time, you're putting your worst stuff first.
Well, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and that's not what you want people to see when they're picking the book up. So I changed my thought process.
Yeah.
So okay, let's do a theme switch. We can throw the older stuff and the newer stuff, and lead with better stuff.
Yeah, because even when I do like projects like trading card sets and stuff, I don't do them in order. I have my list of characters that I have to do, but I bounce around that list so that you don't get like a weak piece up front, or if I have to rush a piece later on, that's not, you can't tell that it's rushed. So this way, everything is sort of like intermixed into the card set, and you really can't tell which ones I had to rush through, which ones that I had a lot of time to work on. So I never try to do anything chronological. I try to mix stuff up, even when I'm working on things.
When you're doing trading cards, that triggered a question for me. Is there a certain point where you feel like you're hitting on all cylinders, like halfway through or a quarter way through? Is it like a bell curve?
Yeah, there is. It's. I mean, you have your list of characters. Like I said, and the way I did the last set that I did, the 2016 set, was as I got an idea for the character, I would do that card. And this way I wasn't really struggling, drawing like, okay, well, now I have to do the blob. So what am I going to do with him? Well, because while I'm working on one painting, so ideas are popping into my head for other characters. So as those ideas popped up, that's the card I did next, which is why none of them were painted chronologically. Yeah, so it's the first couple of pieces are always tough. Like every painting, the first day is one of those days where it's like, okay, this is the painting I'm going to screw up and it's not going to come out right. And once you get sort of that first layer of paint, then you kind of relax and you know where you're going. And with stuff like trading cards or that Tomb Raider book that I painted, once I got the first couple of pages done, I kind of knew where I was going to go and what it was going to look like, and then I just kind of you kind of go not really on autopilot, but you have a road to follow, a map to follow for what you're going to do next.
Makes sense. So the themes, I'll just give a sampling. They're savages, fantasy, horror, adventure, heroes. I'm curious if there was or is a theme that you gravitate or feel comfortable with more than others, or do you hold them all kind of like, your children?
Well, I mean, I'm a superhero kid. I grew up like Joe as a Marvel junkie. My ambition was to work for Marvel Comics from the time I was about 9 years old in a playground, 8 or 9 years old, and some kid was selling comic books, and I picked up Avengers 57 and 58 from the kid in the playground and discovered John Buscema's work. And from that moment forward, that's what I wanted to do. So I was a superhero kid. My ambition was to draw comics, for the rest of my life. And when I got to be like 16, 17, I realized that I was never going to be fast enough. I'm not a natural draftsman where I can just knock out 20 pages a month and do this. So and my attention span is about that long. So I gravitated to painting where I felt that I could do like one image and put everything into one image and then move on to something totally different. So I forgot what the question was. I'm starting to ramble.
Your favorite, if
Oh,
you
yeah.
have one, theme.
So I mean, I love doing superheroes, but the majority of my early career is superhero stuff, until I got to the Savage Sword of Conan stuff. And I found that over the years, I like the more I can relate more to the adventure, the more realistic, if you couldn't call it like Conan or Tarzan or Tomb Raider realistic, the more reality-based characters other than superheroes. I still love doing superheroes. It brings me back and to being 8 years old again. But I really do prefer to do things that are more based in sort of a realistic world. I like painting animals and natural landscapes and stuff like that. So I would say that the more adventure and base characters are more fun for me or I will hold my interest more than the superhero stuff, even though I love doing superhero paintings.
And Joe Pruett, I wanted to ask about Kickstarter and crowdfunding in general, because this is the way you're bringing this project to life, and you've done a number of them as well. What do you know?
I've never done a Kickstarter. This is the first
Oh,
one.
really? I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
Well then, even more so, what do you find advantageous about doing a Kickstarter, and what do you find challenging?
Well, it is this advantages to both. It's a learning curve. I'm learning as we go. I'm checking everything daily and hourly, and it's I would say it's actually been kind of fun. Um, I've been considering doing a Kickstarter project for years and just been too chicken to do it because I know it's a lot of work and into I don't mind
And
work.
it's a gamble.
It's a gamble, right? No, I don't think this book's a gamble because I wouldn't have done it if I thought it was a gamble. Um, but again, I've seen the other publishers doing these projects, these art books, and I'm thinking, well, man, I did the 10 very successful ones, but not this successful.
Yeah.
I like the traditional. I'm never going to abandon the traditional marketplace. I am a big retail supporter for comics, and I know when I was doing Aftershock, when the beginning of the company's career, I went and spent 5 months on the road, hitting 80 comic shops in like 4.5 months, visiting stores one-on-one. And so I am a big supporter and a fan of them, and I want to know that's why we have the very small retail tier here, limited that you have to buy, because I want the retailers to get this book as well and put it in their stores. But I just thought at the time this was probably the best avenue to go. There's too much uncertainty right now in the distribution of comics, with Diamond's problems they're having, and with the other distributors. It's the uncertainty drove me here. I just put it that way. So this actually seems more stable right now.
And given that you're not fully through the campaign, but could you answer the question as to whether you think you'd do it again?
Oh yeah, I've already got my next one lined up. I know I'm doing next. It's going to be another friend of mine I've done before. So, well, it's going to be Jim Sterling. I'm going to be doing Jim Sterling coming up too. So, might as well start with the heavy hitters.
Absolutely. Joe Jusko, I think I know the answer to this question because you referenced it already, but you obviously have kind of your early influences, those who made you want to do what you want to do. But
Right.
as you go along, do you have also contemporary influences? Do you take sort of energy from other people that are doing the same work?
Yeah, well, not even so much the same work. It's just as the longer you work, the more you're exposed to other artists and other illustrators. I started out as Howard Chaykin's assistant. All I knew were comic book artists really when I was a kid, and I broke in actually. I met Howard Chaykin in a comic store this summer. I graduated high school, and he was looking for somebody to work on Empire because his assistant had left, and he hired me to work on this book. I became his assistant, and he's the one who sent me to Heavy Metal and up to Marvel. But through him, I got exposed to a lot of the Golden Age illustrators and 50s and 60s magazine and paperback artists and stuff like that. And it opened up a whole new world for me because I was not aware of any of these guys because I was a comic book kid. And then as time has gone on, because I decided I wanted to paint. Uh, Obviously, the early influences in comics are Frank Frazetta, Boris Vallejo. Uh, Bob Larkin was a huge influence on me when I started working for Marvel because he worked a lot like how I wanted to work, and there are still people who bring me up his covers when his name is cropped off, thinking that they're mine. I have to say, well, that's a Bob Larkin piece there, and so I learned from them. But then as I went on, I have found other interests. I'm a frustrated movie poster artist, and that was something else I always wanted to do. So I fell in love with the work of guys like Frank McCarthy, and Reynold Brown or Bob McGinnis. I'm a big wildlife art fan. So guys like John Siri Lester or Simon Combs were big influences on how I approach wildlife and animals that I paint. It's your influences really, you start to take them in from everywhere. So yeah, it's aside from just like the normal comic book influences that were there when I first began. I've soaked in so much more over the years from so many different avenues.
You've mentioned it a couple times now, but as I said, I got a chance to read some of the book already, and hopefully I'm not spoiling it. I think it's on the campaign, but
Yeah.
your buddy Liam Sharp
Right.
wrote the introduction, and two things stuck out to me within his introduction. One was his praise for how you render animals, which you've said is of great interest of yours, and the other was working in acrylic, which he said, and I'd love to know from a process standpoint. He makes it sound like it is a quite challenging medium. Do you find that?
It took me a long time to master any one medium. If you look at all of my early stuff that I did for Marvel, all those early Savage Sword covers and all of that kind of stuff, up until about the 1995 Edgar Rice Burroughs trading card set that I did, it was all mixed media. I didn't know how to use any one media properly. So I was like those Marvel Masterpiece cards are colored pencil, they're watercolor, they're magic marker, they're gouache, they're acrylics, they're just about everything. Um, and I finally decided I need to learn how to use one medium properly, and I decided acrylics are what suited how I like to work because I'm very impatient and I just want to keep on working. And because acrylics dry almost instantly, it seemed to work for me. But I also wanted to keep a look of oils, like a fully rendered and soft rendered look to oils. So it took me a while to come up with a technique that worked for me. And most people still think I work in oils if they don't know already that I work in acrylics because I come up with this whole process of glazing and highlighting and setting stuff back and pulling stuff out, really thin applications of the acrylics to get the finish that I need. And I think the mistake that a lot of people make when they start with acrylics is they try to use them like oils and they use them too thickly and you can't blend them. The only people I know who have ever used acrylics that heavily and got fantastic results were the Hildebrandt brothers. Their acrylics are really they're tube acrylics and they're really heavy, but they mixed up multiple values of each color, so they were able to sort of like glob stuff together. And if you look at them up close, you see there's not a whole lot of rendering on except on the really important stuff they did. But the later stuff is all sort of very loose and impasto. But yeah, it takes a while to master, but it's a very versatile medium also, depending on how you want your work to look, you know.
Is it, now that you've, mastered it, is it
Well,
faster that,
I haven't no way mastered it. Yeah, it's
well, you've gotten more experience in it.
yeah.
Is it then faster than using mixed media?
Yeah, it is. It is because you don't have to worry about what to use to get the effect that you needed. Now I know my material so well at this point that I know exactly how to get what I want. A quick look at the piece I'm working on now. This is a new Mars cover that I'm working on for John Carter. So this is all done. The rocks and everything are all done in a different technique than the panels, which aren't finished yet. I still have to set them back and glaze over them and stuff like that. But that's all dropping wet paint into like a spray bottle. I spray with a spray bottle and it spreads by itself. So you get to learn your tools the more you work with them. So at this point, I don't have to think about how to do something, and that saves a lot of time. I remember some of those early Savage Sword covers I did would take me weeks because I didn't know how to do what I wanted to do. And I would have to keep trying and practicing and trying to figure stuff out. And, now it's just, it's sort of instinctive. You kind of know how to do what you want to do, even though every now and then you try to do something you haven't done before, like I did when I was younger.
Right.
But it's a lot faster now simply because I have a lot more confidence and experience.
It saves a lot of that decision-making time. You sort of know already what you're going to do.
The
based on-
indecision,
Yeah.
the indecision of when you're not experienced enough can eat up so much time. It really can. So that's if there's one thing you gain from working and over and over and over and over and over again is you learn how your tools work. You learn how to do what you want to do, and that indecision seems to go away.
And Joe Pruett, on the publishing end, there are a lot of decisions to make, and also, people are expecting more and more of their projects, especially those that are on Kickstarter. How did you sort of decide what the extras were going to be? Who to get for an intro, what pieces you want to promote, what you want to hold back for a little bit more of a surprise once they get the book? How does that all get calculated?
Well, Joe picked out Liam for the intro to his book, so he makes that decision himself. As far as like everything else goes, I wanted the campaign to mainly just focus on the book. I mean, I didn't want to do all the bells and whistles or try to lure people in with like shiny beads and stuff like that. We did add a layer of trading cards because Joe's very much known for trading cards. That was actually something that was suggested to me. It wasn't my idea. And I was like, oh, that's an interesting thought.
And I totally get it. Yeah.
Yeah, so we added that in, but everything else is it's just the book. And then we have a slipcase edition and we have a masterpiece edition, which is like, with a virgin unseen cover and his big lion head, which I love. I think it looks great on the slipcase. But yeah, this is the Kickstarter, the campaign is all about him, about his book, and not about all the little add-ons. I'd rather just focus on that.
And I think the one difference for as far as the copy in the book goes from the first book is I had asked friends of mine or guys I respected from each genre that was in that book. Like you said, it was superheroes, there was fantasy, there was horror, to write the intros to each chapter in the book. So Enric did the Vampirella, did the Vampirella sort of introduction. Mark Schultz did the Burroughs stuff. Steranko did the crime fiction stuff. But this time, all the intros, I decided to write all the intros myself, and it's kind of kept it as a much more personal volume this time around.
There's also, I guess I've asked this in a different way, but throughout the career and throughout the book, you've worked in various different, I guess not medium, but well, maybe medium, but like you've done trading cards, you've done
Genres, yeah,
covers,
different
books,
genres,
yeah,
yeah.
different genres, different formats, I guess.
Right.
And I think you have become fairly famous for, trading cards particularly. Would you call that one of your favorite formats, or do you really like kind of moving between different sizes and different types of things?
Yeah, it's when I was younger, I had no set size for anything that I worked on. So like even like the Savage Sword covers, you'd get one that was like, 10 by 15, you get one that was 30 by 40. It all depended on how I felt like working back then. I become a bit more uniform as time has gone on and gotten more comfortable with certain sizes that I work. Like all of the Edgar S. Burroughs paintings I'm doing now right now are all 20 by 30 because it's large enough for me to get the work I want to get in and still a decent enough size for me to be able to maneuver it around my studio. The trading card sizes are dictated by the fact that the volume of work that you have to produce and the amount of time you have to produce it in dictates that you really can't do giant full size paintings. No, that first Marvel Masterpiece set that I did, I painted 104 paintings in 92 days. So that's why they're 6 by 8 and 6 by 8.5 inches. I knew they'd be shot down to trading cards. So they made great trading cards. They didn't look great when they were blown up because it was that mixed media thing with all the, so they kind of fell apart a little bit, but they made great cards because they were painted for that specific purpose. Um, and then like the set I did 2016, I think those were 10 by 14, I think, were the size of those because they were a little bit larger. I had a little bit more time to work on them. So I could do more finished paintings, which is what I always wanted to do, is go back and revisit it and do a more complete set of visualization of the characters. And I had a lot more time. I had like 2.5 years to work on that set, so I could do larger, pretty much full-size paintings. Um, if I had to pick a size that I like working, 18 by 24 is really my optimal size, I think, because it's large enough for me to get the work in, but still, like as I said, a workable size to get it done in a decent amount of time if I have deadlines. I could still do, 11 by 17 paintings, like covers, if they need to be turned out quickly. I don't know if I can work really small anymore because my eyes are 66 years old. So I find I'm wearing like, magnifiers now, even for detail on the big paintings. So I'm finding that the paintings are getting larger as I'm getting older.
And that may have answered my next question, which was around again format, which you've done some interior comics
Yes,
works, not a lot, but you're mostly known for the sort of big splash images, whether it's on a trading card or a cover of that kind.
right.
Do you it is it really I would imagine it takes a long time to do, sequential work, especially if you're doing in painting.
Right.
Is that the main barrier to doing more of that kind of work? Is the time needed?
Yeah, like I said, I'm not the most natural draftsman where I can visualize and lay stuff out. It's again, bringing up Jimmy Palmiotti, he said to me, because people don't realize what a good storyteller you are because you do so little of it. That's why they asked me to do those 3 issues of Black Panther when Tex was leaving the Black Panther book. Casada and Palmiotti asked me if I would fill in until they found somebody else to take the book over. So I did those 3 issues. But by the third issue, I was behind schedule already because I'm kind of meticulous in how I approach stuff. I don't have that get it done and get it out sort of mentality. Um, the painted books were fun. I think start to finish, probably I think the best thing I've ever done it is that painted Tomb Raider book that I did for Top Cow.
Beautiful. Yeah.
And it took forever, but it's I wouldn't change a single panel in that project. But it also kind of ruined me for doing painted sequential work because it's just too time consuming for the return you get out of it. To be honest with you, and again, my attention span is a major roadblock to me doing the same thing over and over and over again. So the Tomb Raider book I enjoyed because I liked the character and I liked the genre, and I when Dan Jurgens asked me what I wanted to draw, I said stick her in a jungle and give her a cat. And I'll be happy. I don't want to use a ruler. I don't want to paint buildings, and it's so it worked out really well because there were things that I just find completely tedious. And one of them is sort of like tech and buildings and mechanical stuff.
I missed that Tomb Raider project when it first came out, but I found it while I was doing research for this show and saw some of the interiors, and it is fantastic looking.
Thank you.
So
It took forever.
I can imagine. It doesn't look like it took forever, but it looks like there was a lot of thought and care put into it, and I'm gonna go I already did, in fact, get a copy on eBay. So can't wait to get that one in the mail.
I was talking to Dan Jurgens over at Terrificon last month, and we're trying to get because the originals are like 14 by 22, and we're trying to get a large format, high prestige reprint of it. Because when it was printed originally, it printed kind of dark, like 3 or 4 pages were actually printed flopped, they were backwards. Which somebody read the transparencies wrong and flopped the pages. So we're trying to get all this corrected. They corrected, I know, a few of them when they did the big hardcover collections at Top Cow, but we'd like to get a full size prestige format a printing of it done. So we're trying to work on that now, so you can actually see what the work that's in those pages.
That would be amazing. Joe Pruett, I'm curious from your end in terms of diversity of work. You're both a writer and a publisher. How do you like sort of having multiple projects in different arenas going at the same time?
Yeah, I think I kind of have to. I can't just do one thing. Like, like Joe can't draw the notes and control, but I just can't do one thing and be happy. So I have to, I have to have a creative outlet. That was one of the reasons I decided to get back into writing and designing the art books. But it's creative for me as well to do that. After spending the last decade basically just being a publisher with very little creative outlet. I miss that, and I think I need that yin to my yang. So I don't want to be a full-fledged publisher again. But doing like little things like this with Joe and other things I have in mind that can get that part of my brain going. And like even now doing the Kickstarter, I'm doing spreadsheets every day and I'm studying the numbers and stuff. That's the publishing side of me, and the publisher part of me that has to figure everything out. But then I spend most of my day today writing a script. So it's like so ideally, if I like to split where I'm doing X amount of pages writing a day, then I spend X amount of hours doing business, and then X amount of hours doing something else. That's my ideal day. That's never my day, but that's my ideal day. That's what I tried to do. But the days are never are what you expect them to be when you wake up.
Yeah, striving for balance.
Right. But I like doing a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
I was one of the Caliber back in the 90s as the creative director there, and I was also like the main talent scout and recruiting talent to come to the company. I'd be in my office and this book needs to be lettered. We need to send it out. That's when everybody sent by post everything still. The art would go to the inker will go to the letter, etc. I say, just give it to me. I'll letter it. And so that's how I learned to be a letterer. And I learned to be a designer because the first book I did, the Brian Ballin one, I had hired 1 or 2 different designers and they both kind of just never got the job done. I said, just give it to me. I'll learn how to do it on the fly. And again, when the eyes said, oh, this is easy.
Yeah.
But I don't look at that one anymore because I'm very proud to have done it. I'm so much better than I was then. So I think with this book with Joe, I'm pretty happy with the layout and design of it. I hope Joe is too.
Yeah, and it's like if you hire somebody else to do that, it's hard for them to match the vision that you have for stuff. It's one of the reasons I've never used assistants for anything, because I'd micromanage too much because it wouldn't look like what I would do probably, which is why I'm grateful for Howard Chaykin for giving me that start when I was like 17 years old because and he just from the start he just let me work on stuff. I was painting on pages. I didn't know what I was doing, but he's up there, do this, do that, and I could never do that. I'm way too much of a control freak to have anybody touch my stuff.
Gotcha. Well, I broke in like you. I was assistant for Bob Burden when he was doing at Dark Horse. So I again think I was going to be an artist, and I came in and it's like, oh, I can eat this background. Like, oh, I'd be help letter this thing here. Let me fill in these blacks. Well, let me go transcribe all your thoughts you have in your tape recorder right now. But it was getting in like that as a system. I don't know if people do that as much as they used to anymore. But that's how I got in. That's how you got in.
Yeah.
I've had interns and at the studio and at my other companies and stuff. So and some of them have gone on to do other stuff. So
I think that might be a dead practice at this point. I know Chaykin still has people helping him, but he's been doing that since since me or since before me. I don't know how many guys use assistants now. I really don't.
Well, you got me in the door, so I'm grateful for it.
Yeah. Yeah. Same here.
Yeah, the break-in stories of the more recent folks that we've had on is very different than the sort of interning and starting out young and really kind of like the sort of mentorship kind of relationships are not as much there, although they sometimes are.
Yeah.
But
Well,
yeah.
well, it's also I see people at conventions and like I'm trying to break in. What should I do? And I'm like, honestly, I'm the worst person in the world to ask on how to break into the industry because I was 17 years old and I was selling covers to heavy metal and Marvel. I met
This is easy.
yeah, it's like I feel bad when these guys are like they're bringing stuff around for 10 years and they're trying to break in. I said I wish I had that story and I can tell you how to deal with that, but I stepped in shit basically back then. I broke in at the right time in this industry because there weren't a lot of people doing painted work in comics back in the
Yeah, you're
70s,
right.
and so I filled a niche where I was painting, so I that's another reason why Marvel kept giving me work because Earl Norman and Bob Larkin couldn't do everything, so I became part of the trifecta up in Marvel where they rotated the covers around. Now everybody works in color to one degree or another. I don't know anybody who doesn't work in color at some point, especially the last generation of guys. Everybody paints, everybody works either in Photoshop or traditional colors. So if I broke in today knowing what I knew in 1977, I wouldn't get any work, because the entry level caliber of everybody in the industry is so much higher now.
It's a good point. I wanted to, as we're coming to a close, I'd love to ask both of you, obviously the focus right now is on the campaign in this book, but what else you might have going on that fans could look forward to? I know, Joe Pruett, you had mentioned maybe a Jim Starlin book, but also that you're doing, I think, an Image series. And then maybe we can move to Joe Jusko.
All right. Right now, I have a new series coming from Image this month on the 24th. It's called Viking Moon. I'm doing it with Marcelo Fruzen. You might know from his work back in Vertigo days on Hellblazer and Loveless and a bunch of other stuff. I think Kick-Ass and stuff too. He's an incredible artist, and he's also coloring it himself. But pages come every day, and I'm like, I'm excited about this one. And then I've got, probably at least two more projects at Image lined up, be coming up in probably the first quarter half of the next year. I'm also doing my first French graphic album for the French market with Philippe. I'm sure I'm butchering his name, Philippe Xavier. He's an artist who used to, I admit, actually, I gave him his first comic book work at Caliber in Negative Bird number 29 back in the day, because he used to live here in Georgia, French guy, married to an American woman, but now he lives in Brussels. And but he went back to Brussels to France and blossomed, became an amazing artist. And so it's fun to work with him after 27 years of not doing so. So that comes out next September, but I've maintained the US rights for it. So I'll place it over here at one or two, companies. There's a couple companies I can place it with. I just put it that way. So it'll be over here around the same time next October. So that's exciting because I've never worked for the French market before, directly for the French market. I've had stuff translated, but never written for them. So that's kind of fun for me too. And then I'm doing some stuff over at Boom and Bad Idea. And I'm sure there's a couple more things I'm not thinking about.
Sounds good. Joe Jusko.
Well, right now I'm smack dab in the middle of the project I've always wanted. I'm painting new covers for every single book that Edgar S. Burroughs ever wrote. So it's like 83 covers or 84 covers altogether. I finished all the Tarzan books. I'm just about 3/4 of the way through the Mars books, and I move on to the other stuff he's done. So that's the main project I have right now that I'm reveling in, because it's really from the time I broke into this industry. I had seen the Adams and Boris covers that were done back in the late 70s. I was like, how do you get that job? How do you get to a point in your career where you're given that job? And
Yeah,
I have that job now. So, and I squeeze in stuff here and there, just Well, I still get stuck if I'm stuck on an idea for a cover or something. I'll sneak in something else for somebody else just to give myself a change of pace to loosen my mind up a little bit. So miscellaneous covers here and there, but the main project right now is the Burrow stuff.
We're back. Guys, check out the Kickstarter. I think there's less than a week left on it. Book of Jusko. Just go to kickstarter.com and look for Book of Jusko. Support that book. It is beautiful. As I say in the episode, I got to see an early online copy of it. It's just going to take your breath away. Lots of amazing Jusko painting work and, more kind of process description from the man himself. And Joe Pruett, I think, has a new work coming out as well. So look for that at Image. It's called Viking Moon. So check that out as well. And he's always got, a couple of irons in the fire there. So thanks both to Joe Jusko and Joe Pruett for being on the show. Thank you all out there for viewing and for listening. And of course, rating, reviewing, subscribing, and going to our Patreon and supporting us there. We really appreciate all the support we get for this show, and we want to keep bringing you interviews. So that'll do it for this week and today. We'll see you next issue.